And with that as well, we have Dr. Eliza Ang, and she's the Chief Medical Officer with Curio Digital Therapeutics, which is the emerging digital health startup that is really taking everybody by storm right now. I think we're seeing the community rally around Curio. And Eliza, welcome to the program. Good to see you again. You are on mute.
Yes, hi everyone. Well, it's very tough act to follow after such esteemed speakers from prior, but I'll try my best.
I don't know about that. I think, again, when it comes to just how much you guys are doing in such a short amount of time, literally just founded earlier this year and already doing a number of different studies and getting a lot of folks. So, really excited about what you're doing because of where it's addressing and what it's doing. Why don't you give us a little bit of background on Curio to start with, and just give the audience some kind of the 1 minute, pitch on what it's doing.
Sure. So prior to that, I do want to tee off to what you're just saying. Why are we getting the traction that we are? And I think it's really simple. Women have very unique health needs relating to hormones and their reproductive health, right? From infertility, pregnancy, perimenopause, and menopause. And very often these issues are related or associated with behavioral health conditions, including depression and anxiety. Yet our system of care is absolutely not set up to address that. So as it's borne out in statistics, correct? 1 in 5 women have experienced a major depressive episode in their lifetime. That's huge. Adolescent girls are twice as more likely to commit suicide than adolescent boys. Suicide deaths are now one of the leading cause of maternal mortality in our country, which of course, I know we all know here that our maternal mortality ranks the worst in all developed countries. And this situation is not getting any better. And that's why we know that we've got a problem. But at the same time, we know we also may have solutions. And I'll tell you why. It's because we know through our work that we can predict and we can impact that. So let's take the case of postpartum depression. First, we took over 16 million women's claims data for 18 months. And what we found was, no surprise, over 10% of pregnant women experience postpartum depression or have some form of mental health conditions. They, again, no surprise, have higher comorbidities, complications, and healthcare utilization. No surprise. What was actually surprising is this. We were able to reliably predict within 3 months of one's pregnancy through their history, who's more likely to develop postpartum depression. If you have anxiety or you have depression, you're 9 times more likely. Even if you have something called seasonal affective disorder in the history, you are 2.7 times more likely. And that's really powerful because if we can predict and we know evidence and we have the evidence to impact, then we have a solution. So that's why, and that comes back to why we start our company. Shalja Dixit, the co-founder, and I, and a few folks set out to build Curio to do this. Our focus is to develop solutions to address this unique women's health needs. So who we are, I'll get to the punchline. We are a digital therapeutic solutions that integrates behavioral health into maternity care.
That's wonderful. And I think, these days, it is very clear that what you're addressing is so critical and really needs to be done quickly. We saw earlier in the program about an hour ago, Richard Sana talking about getting breakthrough status for his device in Sana, which again is also helping folks with anxiety and depression. What are you doing and how are you solving some of these problems that you've already addressed early in the last 5 minutes here?
Sure. Yeah. So let me break it down, right? So there are components to this. The components is identification, screening, intervention, and tracking. Basic population health, basic clinical intervention, transformational type of paradigm. First of all, analytics engine and algorithm. As I've said before, we've developed the algorithm, right, to be able to early identify women. Because of course, just like most conditions, prevention and early intervention is the most effective clinically and also from a cost efficiency perspective. Then we have the ability to deploy timely screening. And what the screening does is either confirm whether someone is at risk or already have depression, and then triage, right, according to their risk category. Those who are at risk will be triaged to a certain type of intervention, and I'll talk about it in a second. And those that are high risk or already have depression has to get a higher level of care. So the core components of ours is, of course, the intervention, which is digital cognitive behavioral therapy. Again, so those at risk in our model, we deploy modules in a CBT digital format to help them build emotional resilience and to recognize red flags. So in a prevention model, right? And those with already mild to moderate depression, our modules are a little bit more intense, a lot more behavioral activation, a lot more self-reflection type of activities in those digital models, what we call higher digital dosing, if you may. And the focus is to restore the participants or the individual's emotional resilience and to help them manage their depressive symptoms. And lastly, we have a provider care management portals so that it's connected to the delivery system, to the ecosystem. Why is that? Number one, a small cohort of this cohort of women ultimately will need or will have escalated symptoms that needs a higher level of care. So the portal and the network provides a safety net for the individuals, in this case for the women, so that if she needs a higher level of care, we can deploy that in real time. And this is, of course, all delivered digitally. And the beauty of it is very scalable and is very cost effective.
And I think that's really critical, right? Because when we look at the mass adoption of these technologies and digital health right now across the ecosystems, employers, hospitals, life science companies, and even with consumers, it is the critical component of that ROI has to be 5 to 10 times, maybe 15 times, according to Professor Frank Lichtenberg at Columbia Business School and some of his medical economic models. And then Mark Beeney, the head of digital therapeutics therapy committee in Express Scripts Cigna. But it's also going to have that, what you're talking about. It really needs to have those kinds of clinical indicators. And it's got really, the clinical indicators are first and foremost within the kinds of patient and physician receptivity models that we study. What have you learned so far about your research and what you have done so far? Just in such a short amount of time, you guys have really scaled fastly. What are some of the early learnings you're seeing?
Yeah. So one thing amongst many that really puts us apart is the robust development process that came to where we are today for Stella, which is our product. The content as well as the modality and the format were really based on 6 years of very robust academic research. So we've done studies that, number one, to validate that women with postpartum depression were open to using e-mental health tools. We've also developed formal research studies to identify themes that are most important to women with or at risk for postpartum depressions in domains relating to changes, interpersonal relationships, symptoms management, emotions, how and where to get help, etc. We take all that learning, develop the products, and then, of course, deploy another research a set of activities to validate the contents and the formats. So, for instance, we learned through these research that women actually really values other women's testimonial to illustrate specific situations. It's very detail-oriented, but that's exactly right what we need to develop a tool and content that's engaging and that others feel relevant. Of course, at the end of the day, clinical efficacy is the name of the game. So we performed randomized controlled trial intervention on 198 women. Control are the groups that are getting usual care and those who receive Stella. And we were able to prove that Stella works or our intervention works. 42% of women who receive Stella who are at risk for postpartum depression reported a much lower and clinically significant EPDS score, which is sort of the standard depression screening score, than those control group, which is 19%. So we're very confident that our intervention work, and we're just really working through operationalize it and commercializing it.
Brilliant. And digital technologies, as we know at the lab, they're up and down. They're hit or miss. It's not everybody is excited to jump onto their phone to do something like this.
Yeah.
And certainly there are some barriers, and that's the whole point of today's symposium, is around the challenges and the barriers. And what are you seeing there? And what do you see as, and we've got about 2 minutes left before Jessica comes in as artist,
Sure.
but what do you see as some of the ways to overcome some of those challenges and barriers?
Yeah, I think there are many, but the most important to us is the engagement, right? So even though our design, and again, through studies, we really optimize our design to promote engagement, which is short-term, bite-size, self-guided, multiple formats, text, video, audio, animations. We also have interactive exercises to promote learning. But we also have added additional components to promote engagement. We have an adaptive learning system to improve adherence through personalization. So for instance, women who had a C-section in the context of Stella will be given very different pathways than women who had a vaginal delivery, because their experiences are different. Their physiological changes and journey are very different from postpartum. So we have that personalization component for users, so that they really feel like this tool is about them and it's for them uniquely. The other component that's really important is motivation, right? So we've created pathways that promotes intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. So we have a point reward systems. So in the context of either payers or employers, we can use sort of points, gifts type of reward system to promote engagement and completion of the modules. Communities, we heard loud and clear through our users that they like to talk to other moms. So we're creating communities so that it promotes that intrinsic relational motivation. One thing, right, is the trust that patients have with their doctors. So our tools or our solutions is very much integrated into the provider's component, especially in the context of our treat module. So we're borrowing that trust that patients have with their doctors and leveraging that as part of that intrinsic motivation. So lastly, of course, we're in technology. We've developed a very robust nudge platform and process to continue to promote adherence.
Brilliant. Well, again, Dr. Eng, thank you very much for joining us today here, and congratulations on all your success in Curio. And as again, just in such a short amount of time, I don't know when you sleep or if you sleep, but well done. And thank you for joining us.
Well, it's the team, and I'm so happy to be working with such a great team. So thank you very much for the invitation to speak here. Excellent.
So really, really glad to have Eliza on. Again, another former student of mine from Columbia School of Public Health, and just a superstar in digital health, as we've seen from Columbia schools of public health, medicine, nursing, certainly biomedical engineering, that department, and then of course the business school. A lot of these digital health leaders emerging.